time to please Allah, a chance to gain reward. I will spend on you, he says, all who spend in good cause. Good deeds are opportunities, sparkling bright and true, raising you in the sight of Allah and adorning Al-Jannah for you. So rush to earn His reward. Don't forget the oppressed, and when you go to sleep at night.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Dear brothers and sisters, welcome to another episode of A Time to Please Allah. As always, Thursday night, live from Dubai. Jazakumullah khair for joining us today. And we remind you, if you missed any of the previous episodes, and you don't want to miss them, inshallah, because we'll always try to bring you things that are of extreme importance, things that are regarding you, the Muslim, the 21st century, brother, sister, young, old, whatever, from wherever. We're trying to make it relevant to you. So if you missed any of the previous episodes, go back to our YouTube and you'll find them all there, inshallah. And also visit our page, Time to Please Allah, on Facebook, and like it, share it, so other people, inshallah, bi'idhnillah, can get the benefit. Alhamdulillah, today we're going to jump straight in, inshallah, because it's a very important topic, following up with the previous episode. And I have my dear, respected brother, Muhammad Tim Humble. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
What's going on? How are you?
I'm very well. Jazakallah khair. Alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah. So last time we had a very important discussion. And, I always recommend to our viewers to take notes. It's important to remember some of the important information that we share here. We were talking about the miracles of the Quran, and we talked about how there's a little debate almost as to what is a miracle and to what extent classifies as a mu'jiza or a miracle of the Quran, and where people have maybe pushed it too much, and so on. And how do we approach that from a tafsir point of view? What are the limits, the limitations? What are the requirements for someone to say, well, this ayah means this, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually means this by this ayah. You want to give us a little, couple minutes, a review of what we were talking, if you
sure.
remember?
So last time we spoke about this issue of scientific miracles in the Quran, what they call al-i'jaz al-ilmi, scientific miracles in the Quran. And we said that, it's really important that we don't, or that we stick within, I think, you can summarize it and say, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. We've made you a middle ummah. We're a middle ummah in everything.
No.
We're not saying that there are no miraculous facts in the Quran. There clearly are miraculous scientific facts in the Quran. But also we're saying that if we take that to an extreme and we start to read things into the Quran that aren't there, and then we start to build our da'wah based upon scientific miracles that are at best a sort of minority tafsir and at worst are just completely made up,
right,
then what we do is we cause a huge problem when we're giving da'wah to people, and people's Islam isn't built upon a firm foundation. Instead, what it's based upon is just an illusion of something that, at best case is dubious, and at worst case is just completely false.
SubhanAllah. And we did mention this, that when people rely upon these things, or they build their Islam, this is their foundation, that it can crumble very fast, especially when they are faced with someone who might be more fluent in science than they are, and they understand things and they can counter it with certain empirical knowledge and information, that it's very easy to destroy that foundation. And we also spoke about the real foundation of Islam, which should be
Tawheed, as we say. Which should be the theological concept of God, which can't be argued, which no other religion on the face of this earth has, and which nobody can even lay a hand's worth of claim to having other than Islam. And as we said, when the problem is not mentioning the odd, amazing, miraculous fact, but the problem is basically making your arena of debate science.
No.
So effectively what you're saying to the person is, you're saying that you're saying let's make science the judge between you and I.
No.
And my Quran will overcome your scientific theories that you have in the arena of science. And that is an extremely dangerous thing to do, because you're effectively playing by your opponent's rules. Instead of playing by your own rules. You're playing by their rules. And so, they come up with, I mean, at the end of the day, we've talked about the theory of evolution. We've said this is really, it should be a factional minority theory that has no real science behind it. And that's what it really is.
That's what it really is,
But it's become so sort of widespread in the world, especially as a tool wielded by the atheists, that it's become what they would term gospel for them. It's gospel for them.
What it is.
It's absolute, undeniable truth for them. And so when you start to say, I'll play on your terms, you make it very, very difficult for yourself to engage a person. Whereas when you say, look, let's bring this back to the concept of God, to revelation, to prophets, to all of the things that Islam, it's kind of Islam's home ground. This is what Islam is there for, the purpose of life and all of that stuff. Then you make it very easy to convince someone, even if they have scientific doubts, while still responding to those doubts. And this is why I'm talking about the middle path. So we're not talking about leaving a person and saying to a person that, I refuse to discuss science. I'm more than happy to discuss evolution with a person who brings it up. But I'm not going to make science my bread and butter in my dawah. It's a subtopic like any other subtopic. Like, you might get, for example,
human rights or something.
I was going to say the treatment of women, or human rights or something in Islam. And someone has a doubt on this particular issue, but it's not your, it's not your bread and butter. It's not what you're using as your mainstay when you're giving da'wah. Your mainstay when you're giving da'wah is the concept of God, the purpose of life, the sending of the prophets, the revelation, the very things that the Prophet ﷺ sent the likes of Mu'adh ibn Jabal to Yemen to call the people of the book to. This is your bread and butter in da'wah.
Principles.
And the other stuff, this is stuff you can dip your finger into from time to time, as long as you bring it back to the core.
On the same topic, today we'll tread the path of understanding the Quran and how do we approach tafsir. And I wanted to share with everyone, because subhanAllah, understanding the Quran is paramount to our faith. Of course, we get ajr from reading the Quran in Arabic, no doubt about it. We know that every letter, there's certain rewards for it, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can multiply that. But the understanding, conceptualizing the message and being able to apply it, this is something that is part and parcel of our faith. And I wanted to take this opportunity to introduce an interesting and very beautiful project, and it's called the Quran Project, and it's an English translation, as you can see. It's the Sahih International English translation, which is very, very good. I'm sure you're very familiar with it. And it's a beautiful project, because these Qur'ans are being now distributed by this organization in hotels. You know how back home sometimes you have the Bible in the hotel, right? So it's like kind of the same concept, right? And I ask, like, why hotels? Because a lot of people travel throughout the world. It's a very good tool for dawah. And you're in the hotel, and sometimes you have nothing to do, and you can read, and it's beautiful. It says here, your path to peace on the front, which is so beautiful. And another thing that comes with this project, it's a partnership between the Quran Project and Donate Quran, donatequran.com, and they have an application which deals with tafsir, explanations of words and so on, ayat, what they mean. And I would like everyone to, inshallah, search this, bi'idhnillah, online, get on Facebook, get on YouTube. Again, donatequran.com is their website. And inshallah, this is approved by the Awqaf here in Dubai also. And the Islamic Information Center is partnering with them. It's projects like these that sometimes push people to try to understand the Quran, right? We are taught, okay, read the Quran, وَرَتِّلِ الْقُرْآنَ تَرْتِيلًا, read it in a beautiful voice. But a lot of us don't understand the Quran. This is the reality, the harsh reality today, that a lot of people do not understand the meaning of the Quran. how do we approach, and when I mean meaning here, I mean what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala what is He telling us in these ayats, right? So what is tafsir first? What is the meaning of the Quran in the first place, Brother Muhammad?
I think one of the interesting things is you gave me a really good definition for tafsir that I was about to use in your question.
Okay.
The essence of tafsir is understanding what Allah is intending by His speech.
No.
That's what tafsir is. It's to understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intends by His speech, the meaning that He intends to convey by His speech, which is the Quran. And I like, before we look at tafsir, I think just let's overview with ourselves. Our relationship with the Quran is built upon certain pillars.
No.
From those things is reading the Arabic of the Quran.
For sure, no doubt about it.
There's no doubt about that. And we mentioned the letters, and every letter comes with 10 rewards, and alif, lam, mim is not a letter, but alif is a letter, and lam is a letter, and mim. So we've got reading the Quran. We've then got memorizing the Quran, because we are a people who are encouraged to memorize the Quran.
No.
And then we have a third pillar of our relationship with the Quran, which is understanding the Quran. And while you're a very young child, you can probably, at a very young age, you can bias yourself towards the first two.
Right.
You can take a very small child and with not so much understanding, heap a ton of memorization on them, lots of reading until they can read fluently. They finish the Quran at least once, cover to cover, and they've memorized a good chunk, because they're less capable of understanding and they're more capable of memorizing. But some of the scholars mentioned that as we get older, we have to do these two in tandem. Otherwise, what will happen is you'll end up memorizing a whole load and understanding not a lot out of it. Or having a good working understanding but no recall. And so when you open a page, you're kind of aware of what the page is telling you, but you don't have any day-to-day, you're not carrying the Quran with you in your heart. You're just basically, you're able to understand it when you open it.
This is something so amazing, because you're speaking to me right now, educational theory. That's exactly what educational theory is around, that you should have recall and understanding, which is something amazing. Every time I look at the history of the Quran, the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, I always say, we've had it way before all these educational theories, came around with these, theories.
No doubt.
SubhanAllah.
And I think one of the amazing things that I remember doing is I remember taking a subject in the Islamic University called the Methods of Teaching. And it wasn't a particularly interesting subject, but it had one element of it that was really interesting, which was educational theory according to the Prophet ﷺ. How he used to teach, things like repetition, things like the way that he used to deliver the message, the way he used to communicate, and so non-verbal communication, and talking about all of these elements are there. And then the scholars afterwards come along and start talking about the importance of learning, of understanding and memorization, of finding a balance, that if you're out of balance, and let's be honest, if we look at educational systems around the world, we see that imbalance. We see some that are very memorization heavy, and some
that are just
which are far too weighted on comprehension solely without any understanding. But the real strength is when you have both of those things and they work together with you. But what I wanted to kind of come back to my point on this topic of purposes of the Quran, we've got these pillars, but they all lead us to one single purpose, and that is to act upon the Quran. And we have to remember that our recital and our understanding and our memorization is all there to serve one single purpose, and that is to act upon it.
Application.
And if we are not applying it in our daily life, it doesn't really matter how much of it we've memorized or how much of it we understand. Maybe it gives us a certain hope that in the future we'll get there faster, but to be honest, on the Day of Judgment, it's very clear that what you'll be asked about with regard to the knowledge you had is not how much you had, but how much you acted upon. So effectively the question that you'll be given on the Day of Judgment is, what percentage of the knowledge that you had did you act upon? And not how much knowledge did you have. Because you see people with so much knowledge, but it's all down to how much you actually put into practice. So the first thing I want people to see when it comes to tafsir of the Quran, I don't want them to feel like tafsir of the Quran is a dry, sort of theoretical subject. Tafsir of the Quran is a manual of how to live your life. And if you're not coming out of the ayah with something that is you should be doing or not doing or believing or not believing or being aware of, or really there's something missing in that tafsir.
Allah Akbar, mashallah.
I think that's important.
That's very, very important. We're going to take a short break, inshallah. We'll come back speaking about tafsir of the Quran. Again, do not forget to check out donatequran.com and the Quran Project. Jazakumullah khair. We'll see you after the break.
A time to please Allah, a chance to gain reward. I will spend on you, he says.
TV commercials motivate viewers into immediate action and to sway consumer loyalty from one brand or service to the other. That's why we're here for you, to help you sell your products and services by using creative ideas that bring life into your own TV commercial. Advertise your business and branded products and services on Huda TV. We will offer you fast-paced and energetic 30-second affordable TV spots. Advertise on Huda TV. Acquire fresh customers and stay within your budget. For more info or to receive a quote, please send your inquiries to advert@Huda TV. Huda TV.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. قالوا أجئتنا لتأفكنا عن آلهتنا فأتنا بما تعدنا إن كنت من الصادقين. له ملك السماوات والأرض وإلى الله ترجع الأمور.
فلما رأوه عارضا مستقبل أوديتهم قالوا هذا عارض ممطرنا بل هو ما استعجلتم به.
أخا عاد إذ أنذر قومه بالأحقاف وقد خلت النذر من بين يديه ومن خلفه ألا تعبدوا إلا الله إني أخاف عليكم عذاب يوم عظيم.
فيهما عينان نضاختان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان. فيهما فاكهة ونخل ورمان فبأي آلاء ربكما تكذبان.
God's fan, sent from Allah to an angel then to man. That man was Muhammad, the best of creation. A time to please Allah, a chance to gain reward. I will spend on you, he says.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome back. A time to please Allah, and we are talking about approaching the tafsir of the Quran. How do we understand what is tafsir, and what should we do to understand the Quran and to obviously in the end apply it, right? So we're talking just before the break as to that the ultimate scope of tafsir is to understand it and to apply it, to understand what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mean, what does He want from us. Now someone might ask us, Brother Muhammad, why do we need to understand, or isn't it clear, or how come we need these tafsir? How do we answer that question?
That's a very good question, and I think to a certain extent it's a sensible question, because you know that the Quran was revealed in a clear Arabic language. And the language was so clear that generally it was understood from the language what was intended by the Qur'an. However, we have to understand that because the Qur'an is of such a high level, that even in the time that the Qur'an was being revealed, the Qur'an was supplemented by an explanation. And some of that explanation came from itself. So the Qur'an explaining the Qur'an. As an example, وَالسَّمَاءِ وَالطَّارِقِ وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الطَّارِقِ النَّجْمُ الثَّاقِبِ. So here you have this word at-tariq. And at-tariq, of course, linguistically can mean someone who comes at night. Someone who comes knocking on your door, tariqun. And usually at night we say this is a tariq. So linguistically it's not entirely clear as to, or it might be, but we want a further clarification. So then we have there this the ayah which comes after and the one that comes after that, clarifying to us what is meant by this particular word, and that it refers to a bright shining star. More than that, we also have to understand that the Qur'an is a book which is in general what we call mujmal. It is comprehensive and it is general in nature. So as an example, the Qur'an tells us وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةِ. Go and establish the prayer and give the zakah. But the details, I mean the real fine details, you might get some details. وَارْكَعُوا مَعَ الرَّاكِعِينَ. Make ruku' with the people who make ruku'. You get some mention of sujood. You get some mention of standing in prayer. But there's not a great deal of the finer details. How many rak'ah do we pray for dhuhr and asr and maghrib and isha, and when do we pray and how do we pray, and when do we read aloud and when do we read quietly, and how do we sit and where do we point our finger, and all of these details are found in the companion of the Qur'an, which is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, about which Allah Azza wa Jalla said, وَمَا يَنْطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. He does not speak from his own desire, it is a revelation that is revealed. So this sunnah is there as a companion to explain either the areas where linguistically there's more than one meaning, and a classic example of that is the example of the ayah الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَلَمْ يَلْبِسُوا إِيمَانَهُمْ بِظُلْمٍ أُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمُ الْأَمْنُ وَهُمْ مُهْتَدُونَ. Those people who believe and do not mix their belief with dhulm, and we'll come to what that means in a minute, it is they who will have a guarantee of safety and security, and they will be guided. The companions, when they heard this ayah, it was problematic for them, because they understood that the oppression mentioned in the ayah was self-oppression, which is sin. Basically lots of types of oppression, but they understood that basically if you don't sin, Allah will guide you. And they, of course, they're thinking practically now, they're not thinking about theoretically, they're thinking practically. None of us don't sin.
None.
Or all of us sin, double negative, but they're thinking that there's none among us except that this person is sinful. So how can any of us be guided when Allah has limited guidance to the people who don't do sin? And so from a very practical point of view, they were very, very disturbed by it and very upset by it, and they went to the Prophet ﷺ to ask about it. And he said, it's not as you have imagined it to be. As you have understood this word, it's not what is meant. The meaning of the word is what Luqman said to his son, Ya bunayya la tushrik billah, inna shirka la dhulmun azim. Oh my son, don't make a partner with Allah. Making a partner with Allah is the greatest form of oppression. So again, you have a word that can be understood in more than one way, and the sunnah comes along and clarifies to us which way it is intended. And then you have to also imagine the Qur'an is of such a high standard and is so deep and so complex and so sort of multidimensional and eloquent. It's hard for us to know where to start with that. You know, if I were to break down, and this is one of the things I don't think a lot of people in English are always aware of this. If I were to break down the words of the Qur'an word by word, like some people do tafsir word by word, these are ordinary Arabic words. They're not words that were never known to anyone before, maybe the huruf al-muqatta'a or something, but generally these words are
They're known.
Are known words that everybody knows what they mean. And the part of the miracle of the Quran is that it is these words.
When you put together.
When it's put together, it is this meaning and this eloquence that the greatest poets that had ever lived couldn't even equate to a single line. They couldn't even bring a stanza that was equal to an ayah of the Quran. And yet the words are just regular words. And that is perhaps, to me, one of the most strongest opinions regarding the broken letters at the beginning of the surah. That the benefit of these is to say to the Arabs that this Quran is made up of the letters that you know and the words that you know. And yet you people, with all of your eloquence, are unable to bring anything like this. And so we have to also understand that that requires a companion guide. That requires, I mean, if you read these days, and if you were to read something like Shakespeare, and you were to sort of just delve into the book, generally you'd have like a companion, sort of like, so something that is explaining the words, sort of giving you, and this is, the action of some, sort of mediocre English writer. Take the Quran, which is the greatest example of language that has ever been seen. You need a companion there to take you through it.
I remember reading Othello in high school and needing a translation, not understanding Shakespeare. But one of the ways that we have to also look at is that we always expect, we say, well, there's a problem with the tafsir, they're so complicated, or the Quran is so complicated. Yet it's not. It's sometimes that we need to kind of flip it and say, well, we need to look at ourselves. Are we at the knowledge and the ability as a personally to understand the Quran? Do we possess those skills that the people, the companions of the Prophet possessed to understand the Quran? This is also a very important
This
aspect.
leads us to another point, that one of the problems we have is that the companions, despite sometimes running into difficulties understanding the Quran, had a level of Arabic that we don't have, no matter how good our Arabic is. And so that also creates a void in terms of, and that's why if you were to stop an average Arabic speaking person who speaks Arabic fluently and ask them, do you understand the Quran? I think the only fair answer they can give you is yes and no. I think if they say to you yes, they're not telling the truth.
Usually what I get from the people, they say, yes, most of it. But
they're not, when they say yes, they're not telling the truth. They understand the words. But it's like you can see the individual trees, but you're not getting the picture of the wood. You're not getting the forest in there. Like the individual words, yes, but something is missing there. And that's what we need to fill in. But it brings us to another point as well, that there's a sort of a key to approaching the Quran in the right way and the tafsir in the right way. If you do it in the right way, you build up your knowledge to the point where you do become confident and competent with understanding the Quran. Again, that's never a journey you reach the end of, but you become competent, you become sort of skilled at what you're doing. But a lot of people, again, and I don't always blame people, I actually think that even the way books have been translated hasn't helped.
No, of course not.
In the sense that people just don't know where to begin. So they tend to begin with the most famous tafsir, or the biggest one, or, random one, or, and they're opening, and it's not the right way to study. And I've come on this show before and talked about the way that you study things, and about the fact that you begin in the most simple and sort of basic way possible, and then you build up your knowledge. For me, Tafsir ibn Kathir, which is the most famous book of tafsir commonly available in English, is an advanced book of tafsir for a serious student of knowledge. And it's not really a book that is intended for your average Muslim to benefit from. Somebody says, okay, summary of Tafsir ibn Kathir, better, but you're still, it's like taking, I'm going to summarize a year 6 medical textbook into a small amount, but it's still a year 6 medical textbook. It was never written to be
for the average Muslim.
Easy for the average Muslim to understand. That's not to take anything away from it. It's an amazing book, and it's a book that every one of the viewers at home should read, but in order. Where do we start? I sometimes recommend us to start with something not a lot of people do recommend. I recommend that we start with a simple translation of the Quran.
Right.
And I'm not talking about word for word. Word for word has a benefit sometimes, but it also can lead you away because you're getting all the words in there. It's good for your Arabic, but it's not really giving you the meaning, because tafsir is not just words. It's about rulings, it's about fiqh, it's about the way that the ayah is worded to give you an understanding of an obligation or a recommendation or a prohibition. There's some stuff in there. But I think starting with a really basic translation, and I mean, you mentioned Sahih International, but what I would recommend from a tafsir point of view,
right.
And I kind of use Sahih International and I use Muhsin Khan.
Okay.
And from a tafsir point of view, I would recommend Muhsin Khan.
Okay.
Not from a reading point of view. Sahih International is much easier. Right. It's a lighter read. It's much nicer for a non-Muslim to read.
Right. Fluency.
There's a fluency there. But from a tafsir point of view, you have Muhsin Khan. What did Muhsin Khan do? He didn't intend for his translation to be a translation.
Right.
He intended it to be a summary of the major books of tafsir in sort of translation form.
Right.
So what he's done is he's basically summarized the simplest possible tafsir that you can get. And it's pretty much available to everybody, online, in every app. Pretty much most of the copies of the Quran you pick off the bookshelf will be this sort of the Mujamma' Malik Fahad, the King Fahad printing complex official translation copy, which is the Muhammad Muhsin Khan translation. And again, it's not the best for just fluency of reading, but for tafsir, it's absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And it's taking you at the most basic level. So you're sort of reading an ayah and then asking yourself, do I really, do I understand? And again, I'm not taking away from the benefit of having a tafsir teacher. That's the optimum.
Right. But
just reading and saying, have I really understood this? Or are there still words in English that I'm not entirely sure what they are meaning? And are there sort of things here that don't fit in with my picture of what Islam is? It's really important when you're reading a book that when you come across something that is for you like a red flag, like something that just doesn't seem to fit in with your understanding of how things work. There's two possibilities. Your understanding can be wrong, or you can be understanding the book
the wrong way.
Wrong. That's something to flag up and ask about. I mean, ideally, we'd love to have a tafsir teacher for every ayah, but practically, you're reading at home and you come across something and you think, I've never heard that before and that doesn't make sense to me. That's where you flag it and you raise it up to somebody who is qualified to say to you, your understanding of the book is wrong, or to say to you that your understanding is correct of that issue, and there's a mistake in the way that it's translated, or you've understood the wrong way. But that's where it's really important to flag. And again, whatever tafsir classes you're getting, you're benefiting from those, but you're going through and just kind of ticking off each ayah. Do I understand it? And then where do I stand with regard to it? If this ayah is a judge for me and is judging my actions, where do I stand with regard to this ayah? So for example, you read Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, and you might see, for example, the Muhsin Khan translation says something like, all praise is due to Allah, Lord of the Alameen, and then it opens brackets to tell you that Alameen is the human beings, the angels and the jinn. Is there something in that sentence that you don't understand? Is there something in there that you're not sure? For example, talking about praise, maybe you don't fully understand what praise is. Circle it, underline it, go and now start to ask yourself, okay, what is praise? And ask the question, ask someone of knowledge, what is this praise? And then ask yourself, how do I stand with regard to that praise and praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and am I falling short in it, and how can I improve in it? That's the kind of sort of question you're asking yourself. And you may come across an ayah where you just don't get it. I mean, you may come to غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِينَ, and in Muhsin Khan it opens brackets and says, not the path of those who have evoked your anger or those who've gone astray, open brackets, the Jews and the Christians, close brackets. And then again, you know, those brackets are really difficult when you're trying to read it fluently,
Right.
but they're really good when it comes to tafsir. Because you're looking at tafsir of the ayah and thinking, well, do I really understand why the Jews evoked Allah's anger and why the Christians are described as being astray? And do I understand that this ayah is not specific to them, but that they are an example of this? Because you have a group of people who know what they are doing is wrong but do it anyway, and a group of people who have no idea what right and wrong is whatsoever. So you need to understand, how can I avoid? Because Allah is not telling you about the Jews for historical benefit. He's telling you about them so that you don't end up doing what they're doing. And knowing the Prophet ﷺ said, لَتَتَّبِعُنَّ سَنَنَ مَنْ كَانَ قَبْلَكُمْ شِبْرًا شِبْرًا ذِرَاعًا بِذِرَاع أو كما قال صلى الله عليه وسلم. You will follow the way of the people who came before you, handspan by handspan and forearm by forearm. So it's a serious issue that whenever you're told about Bani Israel or you're told about the Christians, you're being told about it because you're in very real danger of doing what they did. And many of us have in some ways slipped into doing what they did. So again, you're asking yourself, where do I stand with regard to this? And I would think that even in Surah Al-Fatiha, you probably have 10, 15 questions coming out of that and thinking, okay, and those are where you start now. Let's go into it. Again, this is where you might want to reference something like Ibn Kathir, where you've gone into a bit more detail, and you're kind of stuck on an issue where you want to just get a bit more background on it, and you know, Muhsin Khan's not giving you that background, so you open something like a summary of Ibn Kathir and just have a little look at what's in there. Does that clarify the issue for you? You still have some questions there. So it's a good methodology. Another sort of copy of the Quran, or another
Let me stop
tafsir.
you for now.
All right,
Inshallah.
I'll let you stop me. No problem, inshallah.
Take a break. We'll get back to this
Okay,
after the break, inshallah. Of another copy of the Quran, right, that you want to. Inshallah, we'll take a little break and we'll be right back with the TV, a time to please Allah.
Please Allah, a chance to gain reward I will spend on you, he says.
Huda TV is pleased to announce the launching of its first mobile phone application on all iOS and Android-based devices. Browse your phone store for our new app under the name of Huda TV. Huda app delivers a bunch of amazing and versatile services to our fans and viewers worldwide. You can watch our live streaming on the move, surf our large archive of categorized articles, benefit from our daily supplications Askar that every Muslim should recite throughout the day. Just tap on any item of the Askar list and it will take you to the specific supplication it indicates to. Need to know the broadcast time of your favorite program? Just click to broadcast schedule for specific details. Huda app allows users to browse the gems of Huda TV website, where they can enjoy our telemedia services by watching thousands of video clips, plenty of audio clips featuring invocations, nasheeds, and audio themes of our favorite programs. Go back to the index page and check upon what is going on at Huda TV by visiting ever-updated Huda News. Get to know the profiles of Huda stars and never forget to tap on our behind the scenes button for exploring our backstage activities. It's also worthy to check upon Huda's pages on social media websites and enjoy our awesome posts and sharing. Download Huda TV's app now and live our world of authentic Islamically themed educational knowledge. Huda TV brings light to every smartphone.
Allah, so let me stray. Please guide my way.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk on your favorite channel, Huda TV. I'm your host, Arkham Rashid. They actually did such and such that you're accusing him of in your mind. So now I want to start off with my right hand side, Brother Ahmed. If you can just tell us what your thoughts were on that video, what can you extract from that video? Would you say some of the youth turn to drugs, especially, you know, in your country, if they don't have jobs, or, you know, it's because they want to get away from their daily normal lives? Would you say that's a reason?
Absolutely, that's true. Some people just resort to drug as the last option because they get themselves straight out and they're in a state of depression, but they don't know where to turn for help.
Sports per se is like a communal social activity, whereas it collects the community together, and it bonds brotherhoods together, It's very social in its aspect where you interact with your teammates or your players in a team.
So I think a message would be just to stay completely away from it. Even we can say, oh look, it's haram.
Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah, I'm calling your name. A time to please Allah, a chance to gain reward, I will spend on you, he says.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome back. A time to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's always a time to please Allah, but today, Thursday night from 8 to 9, it's our hour, alhamdulillah, to bring to you some interesting topics, inshallah. We're talking today about tafsir and how to approach the tafsir of Quran. We are following up with a previous episode where we talked about the science of the Quran and how do we approach that, how do we look at that, and what is can be considered a scientific miracle, what is not, and that this is not the basis of our da'wah, that the basis of our da'wah is tawheed, calling people to the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the theology of Islam, that is the forte, the strength of Islam. And today we're talking about tafsir. We just spoke before the break about Muhammad Muhsin Khan's edition with regards to this being a very good tafsir, or to help us understand the Quran. And has a nice setup with the brackets explaining or even expanding that explanation, and then the footnotes are really good. And then you said there's something else that
so this, as we said, my stance on this is that Muhammad Muhsin Khan's translation is not the easiest one to read as a fluent front to back cover read, but as a tafsir it's the best that we have in English in terms of it being intended to be a shortened tafsir. The next level I would go up to are the books of tafsir that were written specifically for the ordinary Muslim and were written to be short.
Right.
So my favorite that I think eclipses everything besides it is Tafsir al-Sa'di. Rahimahullah ta'ala. And the reason why is, and I always argue this, that Tafsir al-Sa'di in of its own right, most summarized tafsir don't bring anything new, anything really sort of unique. They kind of just bring you a summary of what Al-Qurtubi said and what At-Tabari said and what Ibn Kathir said, and they just kind of summarize that for you. As-Sa'di in of his own right brings benefits you can't find in Ibn Kathir and you can't find in Al-Qurtubi, and he brings benefits that are totally unique in a book that is intended for the ordinary person to be able to understand. Now, I'm midway through, sort of in the middle of translating it. It's been translated in the US. Some volumes have come out, some haven't. We're trying to get a free copy out there to distribute to people, but at the moment it's a little bit expensive, but it's worth getting. Juz Amma is out there, Surah Al-Baqarah is out there, Al Imran I think is out there, maybe up to Surah Al-An'am has been printed by now. So there's some sort of progress on that. Any other small ones there, I think Zubdat al-Tafsir, there's some other good sort of short summarized explanations, and they're your next kind of sort of stage. The next stage I would go up to is something that, again, I must be honest and say, if I were deciding to translate a book of tafsir, I don't think I would have chosen Ibn Kathir for all of its virtue and for all of its status. I just think it's the wrong book for your average Muslim who needs just to know what the Quran means for them right now. First of all, it's a book which contains ikhtilaf. And the first thing you never give to the average Muslim is disagreement and ikhtilaf. You don't tell them there are 20 opinions about this ayah, you tell them the ayah means this. And that's what I like about As-Sa'di, because he tells you the ayah means this is what the ayah means. He doesn't tell you the ayah might mean this, it might mean this, and it might mean this, and Mujahid said it meant this, and the Abbas said it meant this, and you become very confused very easily. I think the next stage up is something that I think should be translated, and unfortunately or sadly at the moment hasn't been. Something like the tafsir of Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah ta'ala. So now we're talking about a medium level tafsir. It's still being aimed at sort of the beginner student of knowledge, the more aware average Muslim. It's definitely not at the level of a Sa'di, just purely for the average Muslim.
Right.
At the same time, most of the people attending the dars, it was spoken by the Shaykh. He taught it, in spoken form, and then it was produced in writing. Right. It's not complete, but you have, and I spoke to a very, very good friend of mine who is doing his doctorate in tafsir in Medina, and he received, his master's won a prize, for being one of the best on the topic of tafsir. He has a lot of knowledge about tafsir. And I asked him, if you were to translate a tafsir to sort of hit every market, the beginning student of knowledge, the average Muslim, a bit more than a Sa'di, but a bit less than Ibn Kathir, where would you go? He said the tafsir of Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen. He said it's clear, it's simple, it has a bit of language in there, it has some fiqh in there, it has how to practice it, and it gives you that balance. It gives you detail, but without overwhelming you. So something like that. Then I would go to something like Ibn Kathir. And let's not forget that, at the end of the day, if you want the gold standard with regard to tafsir, it's At-Tabari. At-Tabari is the gold standard, is the one that really, you could call it Tafasir, the mother of all tafsir.
You are talking about reaching that level.
You're talking about like one ayah in At-Tabari will take it out of you. You'll feel the drain, the energy that is required to sort of just...
And you should have some I wouldn't say qualification, but some
that's
prerequisites.
Once you're getting up to that level of Ibn Kathir and then onto At-Tabari, where you're really getting to the level where you are yourself becoming a student of knowledge who is studying tafsir as a science rather than just how I want to practically learn how to put the Quran into practice in my life. If you want to know how to put the Quran into practice in your life, Muhammad Muhsin Khan, Tafsir al-Sa'di, maybe something like the Tafsir of Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen at the higher end of things. And that's all you need to put the Quran into practice in your life. If you want to get into the details and you want to find out why and when and how and where, and you want to get into all of the sort of understanding and the language and the beauty, then you're going up there. Why now, some people are saying, well, there's quite a few famous books of tafsir you haven't mentioned. And there's a reason for that. I mentioned the likes of At-Tabari and Ibn Kathir because these, from an Aqeedah point of view, are solid. They are according to the belief of Ahl Sunnah. A lot of the books in between are quite flawed when it comes to belief. And they've got benefits in them. They have they are books of benefit. They have a lot of benefit for the student. But I definitely wouldn't advise someone who is not very firmly grounded in their creed and theology to be sort of like flicking through someone like Az-Zamakhshari or someone like that, where yes, you are going to get some big linguistic benefits in there and some understanding, but at the end of the day you're going to get a whole load of philosophy, confusion, i'tizal, and everything else that comes in with it. So it's really important that you take tafsir, and this is the point I was leading up to, you take tafsir from people whose aqeedah is sound. And at the end of the day, you come back to that classical statement, إِنَّ هَذَا الْعِلْمَ دِينٌ فَانظُرُوا عَمَّنْ تَأْخُذُونَ دِينَكُمْ. This knowledge that you take is your religion. This is what you're going to worship Allah and stand in front of Allah and say, oh Allah, I worshipped you based on this knowledge. So be so careful who you take that knowledge from. Because there are some people teaching tafsir who have benefits, and we're not going to take those benefits away from them. There are benefits in what they say, but they have major problems in their creed. And likewise, there are some authors who are very, very famous and have major issues in their creed. For me, you are putting yourself at such huge risk when you start going into those books and listening to those kinds of people, that what you're doing is you're basically putting your religion like a Russian roulette, like it might be red, it might be black, and I might end up dying or becoming one of the people of the hellfire because I'm basing my entire religion upon the understanding of somebody who may well have serious flaws when it comes to their belief in Allah. So I think this is critical in tafsir. You don't play around. When you reach a level of aqeedah, understanding, where you have a strong creed, a strong theology, and you have a tutor, you have a teacher who is guiding you, then you might, be
able to look into these things.
Dip into some of these books. Otherwise, I'll be honest, if you don't find it in Ibn Kathir, you don't find it in Al-Tabari or Al-Qurtubi, or Fath al-Qadir by Shawkani or someone, and if you're not finding it here, you're going to have to say that it's unlikely that you're going to find a great deal elsewhere that is not going to come with more harm than benefit. So again, when someone's looking, and some people may not be aware of the books I'm talking about, but that's fine. But you get a wide range. You get some people who read everything. Right. My advice is don't. Start with the simple stuff, go up to the next level and the next level and the next level, but don't go off on a tangent looking at books which are, we all know that the authors had issues in terms of their understanding of Islam. Stick to those who were firmly upon the belief of Ahl Sunnah.
SubhanAllah, this is such an important point, and we find it amongst people of knowledge sometimes, and of course we are in no position to criticize anyone really, but what's truth is truth, and no matter who it is that stands against it, they can have a high pedestal in front of the people, but truth is truth.
And sometimes it's not sometimes it's not deliberate on the part of the speaker. Right. I remember having a teacher of tafsir, and the reason I'm so passionate about this, I had a teacher of tafsir when I was in the university, and he himself, in terms of his belief, was perfectly fine, but he wasn't really very strong in understanding the principles of belief. And so sometimes he would give the tafsir of the ayah which contradicted the consensus of Ahlul Sunnah in their belief, without him going to that extent, but just not realizing that he was doing it. And we were very blessed to have a teacher of Aqeedah come in after him. And we would run sort of issues by him. He would say, no, this goes against every principle of Ahlul Sunnah. And we would go back to the tafsir teacher and say to him, Shaykh, you just gave us this crazy, ilm al-kalam, this philosophical, rhetorical understanding of the ayah. And he would say, no, I didn't. And it's a big problem. Me personally, if I could, I wouldn't learn tajweed from someone who didn't have good creed, let alone tafsir. Because I'll be honest with you, at the end of the day, you are putting, this is your religion, this is what you're going to stand in front of Allah, and Allah Azza wa Jal is the most forgiving and the most generous, but there are certain limits that you just don't cross, and one of those are your fundamental beliefs. You come in front of Allah with the right beliefs, and you have a very high hope that the rest of the stuff will be overlooked and forgiven. And you come in front of Allah with the wrong belief, and you've put yourself in a really, really, really dangerous situation. So I think that it's critical that people take it really seriously, who they take it from, and they really, try to stick to the books that are really well known for the correctness of what they are teaching people, especially, and it doesn't hurt to be aware of the common errors in tafsir, like the Asma wa Sifat, the description of Allah's names and attributes, where many of the books go wrong. And you can almost, if I get given a book of tafsir, I can probably open 10 ayat of the Quran and just say straight away whether this book is in the right sort of vein or not, by just picking at 10 ayat that are commonly misinterpreted. And again, Allah Azza wa Jal tells us about this in the Quran. And anyone who wants to sort of reflect on this, just have a look at the first page of Surah Al Imran towards the bottom of the page. And Allah Azza wa Jal speaks about the fact that there are two types of ayat in the Quran. That there are ayat which are muhkamat. And the meaning of muhkamat is that they only carry one possible interpretation. Allah does not forgive you make a partner with Him.
You cannot interpret that.
Like you can't say, well, He might forgive it. Allah does not forgive that you make a partner with Him. Period. Full stop. There is no discussion on the topic. That's it. And then there are ayat that carry multiple meanings. When the multiple meanings are contradictory and severe in terms of the misunderstanding in it is very difficult. As an example, whoever kills a believer deliberately, his recompense is hellfire and he will be in it forever. If you understand this ayah in the wrong way, you could end up completely deviating from the belief of Ahl Sunnah and basically forming the basis for the belief of these extremist groups that exist in the world today, that slaughter people. A lot of their fundamental errors come from these errors in creed. And it's huge, but Allah tells us these ayat exist in the Quran, and He tells us those people who have faith and those people who have knowledge, they return the unclear, or we'll not say unclear, but we'll say those that have multiple meanings to those which have a single meaning. And they understand all of them in light of one another. They don't take one ayah of the Quran and believe in some of the book and disbelieve in some of the book by saying, I've taken this ayah but I've rejected this ayah. And again, very common among, it's not just among extremist groups, but among regular people. You hear someone come and say, this is the ayah, as if there is no other ayah in the Quran. And the reality is that the Quran is a whole, and the Sunnah is a part of that whole. And you can't have an ayah that contradicts the Quran or a hadith that contradicts an ayah.
For sure.
The contradiction is either in ourselves, or we've misunderstood, something there, or the hadith is not authentic, or something to that extent. It's a serious issue, because people come along and they have taken one ayah or one hadith and they've looked at it with a very narrow lens, and that leads a person to huge problems. And so many of these groups, if you look at these sort of groups and sects that exist, the fundamental beliefs that they have come from misunderstanding one or two ayat of the Quran only. And you come to a person who's sort of worshipping someone besides Allah, and you say to them, how could you, the whole of the Quran is telling you not to worship someone besides Allah. You're worshipping someone besides Allah. And they say, yeah, but Allah said in Surah Al-Kahf. And just as soon as you hear that word, you pause and think, one ayah in Surah Al-Kahf, that's it. Nowhere else in the Quran. In all of those, subhanAllah, 114 surahs and 600 and something pages, you didn't find anything other than one ayah in Surah Al-Kahf. Do you think it's possible that maybe you misunderstood that ayah in Surah Al-Kahf? And the other 599 pages,
very clear.
But subhanAllah,
this is the way people.
It's really important when we make this tafsir that we see the Quran and the Sunnah as a whole, and we don't see it as an ayah that is like an island on its own and has no relation to any other ayah.
Jazakallah khair. Sorry we're out of time, mashallah. Usually when we have a show, we need to move to another third episode. I think we're going to have to continue with maybe the same, inshallah. Jazakumullah khair. Beautiful show, inshallah. If you've missed part of it, make sure you go back. Inshallah, tomorrow this should be up on YouTube. Again, check our website, our Facebook page, A Time to Please Allah. And we'll see you, inshallah, next Thursday. This is your host, Gabriel Al-Romaani, and with Brother Muhammad Tim Humble. We'll see you, inshallah, next time. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
To please Allah, a chance to gain reward, I will spend on you, He says, all who spend in good cause. Good deeds are opportunities, sparkling bright and true, raising you in the sight of Allah and adorning Al-Jannah for you. So rush to earn His reward. Don't forget the oppressed. And when you go